A warm reception atop Prague Castle. The Prime Minister Liz Truss meeting her Czech counterpart with a bouquet in hand. But the opening of this Crunch summit is no bed of roses. Russia's war in Ukraine threatening energy supplies across Europe and prompting fears of energy blackouts at home. Fears so recently dismissed.
In France, they talked about the possibility of energy rationing. Can you rule that out, Liz Truss?
I do rule that out, yes.
You rule out energy rationing.
Office workers too have joined in the spirit of things, working by whatever light they can find.
This unappealing feature of 1970s politics was today ruled back in by the national grid in the event of a cold snap, low winds and President Putin shutting off gas supplies to Europe in a move that could see European nations curbing energy exports. The grid's winter outlook report laid out 3 possible outcomes for the month ahead. The first and most likely, what it calls its base case, would see no material reduction in consumer demand. The second assumes no electricity interconnector imports from France, Belgium and the Netherlands. This could see supply to some customers interrupted for limited periods of time. The third, this is the worst case scenario and they say unlikely, would also see the gas supply interrupted. This would leave some customers, they say, without power for predefined periods of 3 hours.
We have interconnectors with our European partners. We're working on more gas supplies. We're working on building out nuclear energy, building out wind energy, so we do have a secure supply of energy.
But can you still guarantee it?
Well, what we're clear about is that we do have a good supply of energy in the UK. We're in a much better position than many other countries, but of course there's always more we can do.
To avoid this, the grid has got 5 coal-fired power plants on standby, as well as a new publicity campaign ready to launch in November, encouraging businesses and consumers to use less power during peak times. It's one already trialled by the energy firm Octopus, who gave some consumers with smart meters a day's notice to cut usage in return for payments. But some suppliers say those payments may be too low to get them to sign up. In France, less carrot, more camaraderie, as Macron urges his citizens to work together to get usage down.
I'm telling you very simply, if the whole country manages to work together voluntarily, without laws, without decrees, we'll manage even in the worst case scenario.
An early night for the Eiffel Tower. Ministers in puffer jackets during meetings indoors. While the French government lean into the energy-saving campaign, Downing Street is reluctant to lead the charge, leaving it to the national grid to publicise its so-called demand flexibility scheme.
Energy reduction can take lots of different forms. It can be simple things like an information campaign from the government to help people save energy at home, turning down your boiler thermostat. That's very common across Europe, as is simple things like turning off the lights when you're not in the room. But for some reason, our government's not choosing to do these things, and that's really a glaring hole for many energy experts.
Today, the Prime Minister urged European nations to keep energy exports flowing through winter, even if Russian supplies are halted and they have to ration their own. Lights going out, unlikely for now, but the prospect lingers faintly on the horizon.
Well, the Conservative MP Greg Hands joins me now. He was Energy Minister until Liz Truss became Prime Minister. Greg Hands, given that France has said they've got enough energy to tide them through the winter, no matter even in the worst case scenario, why doesn't the UK have enough?
Well, look, the UK does have enough energy. The UK energy security remains very strong. We produce 50% of our own gas. An additional 30% comes from direct pipelines from Norway. 20% on top of that from liquefied natural gas, LNG, where we've got some of the world's best facilities. So the UK, we're in a very good position when it comes to energy security. Today's report comes out each year. It always says these situations are unlikely. I think this year is slightly less unlikely than usual, but nonetheless unlikely. I don't think it is a cause for immediate concern.
Okay.
But the government has taken actions over the last year, like, for example, buying forward in the capacity market and of course making sure that we continue to produce as much of our own gas as we can.
Right, but I wonder if the fact that France is able to say, even in a worst case scenario, we're still going to be okay, and we don't, is because the government hasn't taken sufficient action. So, for example, there'd be no new onshore wind developments of any scale that gained planning consent in England since 2015. The government closed the natural gas storage facility off the coast of East Yorkshire in 2017. It scrapped the Green Homes grant for insulation after 6 months. Belatedly, they've reinstated some of that now, but the government could have done more to avert this, couldn't they?
Well, no, actually, the government has done a huge amount. And you mentioned France, and I know the French Energy Minister well, Agnès Panachy, and she came to me not so long ago and said, look, the UK is a model when it comes for doing particular things like particularly offshore wind. The UK is #1 in Europe for offshore wind, so we put a lot of money into offshore wind. We've got excellent solar, we've got excellent onshore wind, we're building up our nuclear, we're currently building Hinkley Point C, so we are taking very significant action to improve and increase our energy security in the long term. But
too slow
as I say, in the short term,
wind,
the UK
though, right?
is...
I mean, that's only very recently in the mini budget got forgotten amidst everything else, but that was, you know, it could have happened years ago, couldn't it?
Well, look, as I say, we are #1 in offshore wind. The UK is actually the second best in Europe for energy security. Only Norway, with all of its resources of oil and gas and hydropower, a relatively small country, is in a better position than us. So the UK, when it comes to energy security, is in actually the best position of any major European economy.
So should the government take the very simple step this winter of saying to people, turn down your thermostat, do a bit more to reduce your energy consumption? That'd be a win in terms of cost, in terms of not being so dependent on Vladimir Putin, and also environmentally.
Well, we're not dependent on Vladimir Putin at all. Let's get this misnomer corrected.
But my point is that Germany and France have told people to turn down the thermostat, to put on a jumper. The UK government has decided not to do that. Is that the wrong decision?
Yep. OK, but Germany and France are, or Germany in particular, is dependent on gas from Vladimir Putin. The UK is not. Last year, less than 4% of our gas came from Russia. We haven't had a direct gas delivery from Russia since March this year.
Yeah, but you know, so we're dependent on Europe and they're dependent on Putin. But if I could just address my point about people,
we are dependent on our
own...
The message to people, but let's just be clear, the UK is not dependent on Vladimir Putin. We have our own gas supply, and we take a lot of supplies from Norway through direct gas pipe connections. When it comes to advice, I would say to everybody to speak to their energy supplier, look at their energy supplier's website. There's a lot of very good advice directly from energy suppliers. Everybody's individual circumstances will be different. Their energy supplier will know their individual circumstance. That's the best way to go forward at this point.
You don't think turn down the thermostat? You don't think people should do that? Use less energy?
Well, there is an argument about the temperature inside your boiler. The boiler thermostat, that's beyond my technical capability, but what I know that is something that could be looked at, but that should be done, you know, with an energy supplier, with a proper technician looking at that and follow technical advice.
We're obviously, this is not the only crisis we're facing this winter. There's the massive crisis, the financial crisis that we're in the midst of. You backed Rishi Sunak, whose warnings about the run on the pound have proved remarkably prophetic. Do you think the chances of him becoming Prime Minister in the coming months are higher than the risk of blackouts this winter?
Well, look, I don't think Liz Truss is our selected Prime Minister, selected by the Conservative Party, is our Prime Minister. The important thing here, I don't think we are facing a financial crisis. Actually, the exchange rate has recovered. Across the world economy, we are seeing higher interest rates. That has been part of pulling out of the pandemic, partly driven by an increase in energy costs and other costs. You know, the UK is not alone in facing some of these challenges, particularly with higher interest rates.
Greg Hands, thanks very much.